Welcome to the Two Beans in a Pod by Chamie and Haley. Today we're diving deep into a topic that touches on some of the most profound and perhaps mysterious aspects of human experience. The idea of a collective consciousness. Have you ever been in a crowd, maybe at a concert or a protest, and felt a surge of emotion that felt, well, bigger than yourself?
Mhm.
Or witnessed a moment of global attention, like a major news event that seemed to ripple through everyone you know? It raises a fascinating question. Can our shared thoughts, feelings, or, focused attention actually create a measurable impact on the world around us, a tangible force?
Indeed, it's a question that really spans from foundational sociological theory all the way to some pretty audacious modern scientific experiments. We're going to explore how a thinker like Émile Durkheim, often considered, a father of sociology, understood this concept of collective consciousness theoretically.
Right.
We'll fast forward to modern attempts to empirically measure such phenomena, like the intriguing Global Consciousness Project.
Okay.
What's truly fascinating here is how these two very different approaches, one sort of philosophical, one experimental, grapple with the same fundamental question about the unseen power of groups, especially when people are unified in thought or emotion, like, say, in a moment of mass group prayer.
Okay, let's try and unpack this idea of collective consciousness then. When we hear that phrase, it's easy to picture something mystical or, abstract, maybe even a kind of group mind like in a sci-fi movie.
Sure, yeah.
But Durkheim, as a sociologist, he approached this from a very grounded perspective, right? How did he originally conceive of it, trying to avoid the supernatural?
Well, for Durkheim, it wasn't about some separate ethereal entity floating above individuals, not at all. He saw collective consciousness as an ensemble of all social similarities, something that arises naturally from the association and similitude of individual consciousness.
Association and similitude. Okay.
Yeah, imagine individual minds coming into close, intense contact, interacting, sharing experiences, mirroring each other. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about what emerges when these individual minds synthesize and actively exchange. It's a new kind of social reality that's created.
So it's not a substance, not like a physical brain, but a new kind of psychic life that forms from this interaction. How does that feel or manifest for the individuals who are in the group?
Precisely. When individual consciousness is synthesized through intense social interaction, a psychic life of a new kind emerges. That's his term. Durkheim described feelings within groups as having an energy that purely individual feelings do not reach. Think of, like, the electrifying atmosphere at a major sporting event, or maybe the shared grief following a national tragedy.
Right, you feel swept up in it.
Exactly. Individuals might even feel dominated by forces that they do not recognize as their own, as if transported to a different world from that in which his private life passes. It's a powerful sense of being swept up, of individual maybe seeming to recede in the face of a larger collective current. This raises an important question, though. If this collective consciousness is so powerful, how does it leave its mark on the world? How does it become something we can actually observe and analyze?
And this is where his idea of social facts comes in, isn't it? Things that are external to individuals but are undeniably products of this collectivity, shaping our behavior without us always realizing it.
Yes, exactly. These social facts are Durkheim's way of talking about the tangible products of collective consciousness. They are embodiedly enacted, endogenously produce accountable sociological phenomena of social order. Now, that's a bit dense, I know, that academic quote.
Yeah, let's break that down a bit.
Right. Essentially, social facts are shared ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that exist outside of any single individual but powerfully shape our behavior. They are objective and external, not because they're mystical, but because they result from the shared interactions and representations of many, many individuals.
Okay, so like unspoken rules or values.
Yes. Unspoken rules, shared values, moral codes, even institutions like marriage or education systems. They feel like external realities because they're products of the collective, not just your personal whim, making them accessible to everyone and resistant to individual arbitrary change. They compel us, not necessarily by law, but by their deep collective acceptance.
And you mentioned representations earlier. What stands out to you about how Durkheim understood representations in relation to consciousness and how they contribute to this shared reality?
Durkheim saw representations as absolutely central to the activity of consciousness itself. These aren't just like mental images in your head. They are the ideas, symbols, and concepts that a society collectively holds. He called them twofold realities, objective as well as subjective. meaning they involve both the act of thinking and the thing being thought about, which is often a shared cultural concept.
Okay.
He was essentially exploring intentionality, the idea that consciousness is always consciousness of something, and that something is often shaped by our social world. This implies that even what we perceive as purely individual thought, our very perception of reality, has an inherent connection to a shared objective dimension formed by these collective representations.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think of a flag. It's just cloth,
Yeah.
right? But collectively, we infuse it with meaning, patriotism, sacrifice, identity that feels objectively real and powerful. Collective effervescence, that intense emotional energy generated in communal rituals or gatherings, is another prime example where these representations become intensely felt and reinforced.
Okay, that makes sense. So Durkheim gives us this really profound theoretical framework for how collective consciousness emerges as this emergent shaping force. But the obvious next question is, can something so seemingly abstract actually be measured?
Right.
And that's where the Global Consciousness Project steps in, attempting to bridge this theoretical concept with empirical data, also known as the EGG project.
Right.
What exactly is this project trying to do? What was their goal?
Well, the GCP, which began back in 1998, is essentially a parapsychology experiment. It aims to detect possible interactions between what they call global consciousness and physical systems. Their methodology is based on this hypothesis that events eliciting widespread emotion or simultaneous attention from large numbers of people might statistically significantly affect hardware random number generators, often called RH.
Random number generators. Okay, for many of us, that just sounds like something a computer program uses for, like games or security codes. How does that actually work in this context? What are they?
That's a great question. These aren't just software algorithms, not typically. They are physical devices designed to produce completely unpredictable, truly random sequences of data. Think of it like an electronic coin flip happening millions of times per second.
Okay. Constantly flipping.
Exactly. Continuously generating a stream of ones and zeros, with an expectation that over time, the number of ones and zeros will be roughly equal and there will be no discernible patterns, pure randomness. The GCP maintains a global network of these arrays, I think around 70 locations worldwide at its peak. Custom software continuously records their output. The idea, the core hypothesis, is that during moments of heightened collective focus or emotion,
Like a global meditation, maybe?
yeah, or a shared reaction to a major world event like a natural disaster, or even, hypothetically, a moment of mass group prayer. The idea is that these supposedly random outputs might show anomalous, statistically significant deviations from their expected randomness.
Wow. So they're looking for these incredibly subtle nudges on pure randomness, almost like a collective mental field, creating a tiny ripple in the fabric of chance.
That's the premise, yeah.
And you mentioned examples like the death of Princess Diana or Gaia Mind meditation. What are some of the most well-known events they've pointed to as evidence?
Precisely. Those are examples of the kinds of broad, emotionally resonant events they monitored. Perhaps the most widely discussed event they analyzed was around the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks.
Right, I've heard about that connection.
The project claimed to find a statistically significant deviation in their data during that period, suggesting an anomalous pattern that coincided with the global shock and shared focus. They've also looked at synchronized global meditations, other large-scale tragedies, and even celebrations like New Year's Eve, things like that.
Okay, here's where the real debate often begins for anyone looking at these claims, myself included. This sounds incredibly compelling, almost too good to be true, doesn't it? If the project claims such significant findings, what have the critics, especially from mainstream science and statistics, pointed out about the Global Consciousness Project's methodology and findings? Because there is skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. This raises a crucial point. While the project is often praised for its open access to data, which is commendably transparent, you have to give them that, there's significant skepticism from statisticians and skeptics. Critics, including figures like Robert T. Carroll and Klaus Larson, argue that the reported anomalies might actually be due to issues like pattern matching and selection bias in how the data is interpreted.
Pattern matching. You mean seeing patterns where there aren't any?
Kind of. Or, perhaps, finding patterns after the fact. For instance, with the 9/11 data, some independent analyses concluded that the apparent significance was fortuitous, meaning it looked meaningful just by chance, essentially. And alternative statistical methods yielded only chance deviations. It's vital to remember that spikes and fluctuations are, after all, completely expected in any truly random dataset. The huge challenge is determining if they are meaningfully anomalous or just part of the random noise.
So if you're looking hard enough for patterns in a sea of randomness, you're kind of bound to find some, even if they don't actually mean anything.
That's a major concern, yes.
Are there other statistical pitfalls critics point to beyond just pattern matching, like how they decide what to look at?
Absolutely. Two common issues often raised are the file drawer problem and the distinction between what's called a priori and post hoc analysis.
Okay, file drawer.
The file drawer problem suggests that if you run many experiments or analyses, the ones that show no effect tend to get filed away and aren't reported. But the ones that do show a seemingly significant effect, maybe just by chance, do get published. This leads to a biased perception of overall success.
Oh, okay. And the other one, a priori.
A priori versus post hoc. A truly strong scientific hypothesis specifies in advance that's a priori exactly what effect will be measured, when, and how. If you only analyze data after an event has happened, and then you go searching for patterns that seem to match the event, that's post hoc analysis.
After the fact.
Right. It's much easier to find significant correlations that way, but they may not hold up to rigorous testing because you're essentially fitting the hypothesis to the data rather than testing if the data fits a pre-stated hypothesis. This weakens the predictive power and really increases the chance of false positives.
So even if there's a solid theoretical basis for collective consciousness and its emergent power, like Durkheim described, the scientific evidence for its direct physical impact, particularly on things like random number generators, it remains highly debated and, well, scientifically unproven.
That's right. Roger Nelson, the director of the GCP himself, conceded back in 2007 that the data wasn't solid enough for global consciousness to be said to exist at all, and importantly, that it wasn't possible to predict what the generators might be responding to.
Wow, from the director himself.
Yes, and as Robert Matthews, a mathematician, famously put it, data without a theory is as meaningless as words without a narrative. You need both. More recently, in 2017, Peter Bansal, who was also involved with the project, published a reanalysis concluding that the data do not support the global consciousness proposal overall. He favored an interpretation of a potential goal-oriented effect in specific, structured experiments rather than a broad, continuous global effect.
So more targeted effects maybe, but not this grand global field.
That seems to be where some of the later analysis pointed. It truly highlights the immense challenge of trying to measure such an abstract and perhaps incredibly subtle concept with physical tools. The tools might not be right, or the effect might not be there in the way they hypothesized.
We've delved into the profound theory of collective consciousness and its audacious attempts at measurement. If these deep dives into complex topics are sparking your curiosity as much as they do ours, please consider supporting the show by hitting that like button and subscribing. It truly helps us bring you more of these explorations. So we've navigated from Durkheim's really robust sociological theory of collective consciousness, describing it as an emergent force arising from human interaction and powerfully influencing our social reality, all the way to the Global Consciousness Project, this modern attempt to detect a direct physical manifestation of collective attention or emotion. What does this all mean for our understanding of group phenomena? Especially something as profound and potentially unifying as mass group prayer, which you mentioned earlier.
Well, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, both approaches, in their own distinct ways, are grappling with the idea that when many individual minds align or intensely interact, whether it's through shared beliefs, deep emotions, or focused attention, like at a large prayer gathering, something unique and potentially powerful emerges. Durkheim described it as a highest form of psychic life, capable of creating these impersonal representations, like concepts that are, in his words, out of time and becoming, and can be universally shared. These aren't just individual thoughts, they become collective realities that shape us.
It seems like the core idea isn't that society has, like, a separate brain somewhere floating around.
No.
But rather that the interplay and synthesis of individual brains creates a shared reality, a shared mental space that then profoundly influences those same individuals. It's like the water we swim in, perhaps, that we don't even notice most of the time.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Society, in Durkheim's view, has a psychical existence, a mental or conscious aspect that emerges from the combination of individual psychic experiences when they associate. It's a new reality formed by the grouping of individual minds. Think of how a shared cultural narrative or strong moral norm becomes almost instinctively understood and obeyed, not because of a specific law, but because it feels like an undeniable part of our shared world.
Right.
And it's worth noting, phenomenologists like Husserl and Schutz, they came at it from different angles, but they also acknowledged the existence and objective nature of collective consciousness and social facts, even if they debated the how. The effect of shared mental states, whether through ritual, protest, or even modern social media trends, can be observed to create powerful social facts and a sense of shared reality.
So what stands out to you as the core takeaway here for us, for you listening, about the power of collective consciousness, particularly when we consider examples like mass group prayer or intense shared experiences?
I think the core idea is that collective consciousness isn't a monster or some mystical entity that overrides individuals, as some people have misunderstood Durkheim. That's not it. Instead, it's the tangible, emergent product of human association. It leads to shared representations, shared norms, and a deeply felt sense of collective reality that influences all of us. Now, whether its effects can be directly measured on physical systems like random number generators, that remains a subject of intense scientific debate and needs much more exploration. It really highlights the current limits of our measurement tools, perhaps. But the sociological and psychological reality of our collective mental life, whether in moments of profound shared experience, communal rituals, or even mass group prayer, is undeniably a powerful force. Even if its precise mechanisms are still being fully understood and measured, it reminds us that our individual minds are never truly isolated. They are constantly shaped by and in turn contribute to the vast, often unseen currents of collective thought and emotion.
This deep dive certainly gives us a lot to ponder about the unseen forces that shape our world, doesn't it? From foundational sociological theory right up to the cutting edge, sometimes controversial, experimental parapsychology, it leaves us wondering, how much of what we perceive as individual is actually a reflection of the collective consciousness we're immersed in every single day? Something to think about. Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod. If you are interested in the book, please order it from the link below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod to join us for more deep dives into the intriguing connections between our minds and the world around us.